Scientists found bones under a cave floor and panicked. What if the ground beneath an ancient cave was hiding something no one was supposed to find? Not treasure, not tools, not some forgotten object. Bones, buried under the floor itself, not lying in the open where erosion, animals, or time could move them, not scattered in a chamber where anyone exploring the cave might see them, hidden underneath. And that is what makes this kind of discovery so disturbing, because when bones are found under a cave floor, the first question is not just what they are. The first question is why they were there in the first place. Caves already feel ancient. They feel sealed off from the world, removed from sunlight and ordinary life. But the floor of a cave creates another level of separation. If bones are hidden under that surface, then someone or something put them there before sediment sealed them in. That means intention. It means concealment. It means the possibility that the cave was not just a shelter or a passageway, but a place chosen for something far more deliberate. The discovery began in a cave system that had already produced traces of ancient occupation. Researchers had found stone fragments, evidence of fire, animal remains, and layers of compacted sediment built up over thousands of years. Nothing about the site was unimportant. It clearly preserved a long history. But it had not yet produced the kind of finding that forces an entire team to stop, rethink, and begin recording everything with a different level of caution. Then something beneath the cave floor changed the excavation. At first, the signs were subtle. The floor in one section of the chamber looked slightly different from the surrounding surface. The compacted earth and stone had a texture that didn't match the adjacent layer. That could mean many things: natural collapse, disturbance caused by water movement, animal burrowing, previous excavation damage, a hidden void beneath the surface. In archaeology, differences in soil or stone are often where the real story begins, so the team started removing the upper layer carefully. What they expected was some kind of structural explanation. What they found instead was bone. At first, only a fragment, then another, then enough to make one thing clear: this was not random. The bones were under the floor, not on it. That distinction matters more than it sounds. Bones on a cave floor can arrive in many ordinary ways. A body might have died there. Animals might have dragged remains inside. Flooding could have carried fragments into the chamber. Bones can collect in caves over time through all kinds of natural processes. But bones beneath a compacted cave floor are different. They suggest burial, concealment, or some kind of ancient covering event. They suggest a sequence. First, the bones were placed or deposited, then the floor formed above them. That is why the atmosphere changed the moment the team realized where the remains were located, because now they were no longer excavating a cave. They were opening something hidden. Archaeologists immediately slowed the work. That is what trained researchers do when context suddenly becomes more important than speed. Every layer matters. Every fragment matters. The angle of the bones matters. The density of the surrounding sediment matters. The relationship between the remains and the floor above them may eventually decide whether the discovery is interpreted as natural deposition, accidental entrapment, or deliberate burial. And in a case like this, interpretation is everything. As more material was exposed, the pattern grew more unsettling. The bones did not appear to belong to random animals. They looked human, or at least hominin. There were long bone fragments, parts of a rib structure, and eventually sections that raised the possibility of a skull. The remains were incomplete, but not chaotic. They seemed to belong to a body, or to a set of bodies, that had once occupied a meaningful position under the floor. That is when the team understood the scale of the problem, because if ancient human bones were hidden beneath the cave floor, then this site was no longer just a cave with traces of occupation. It was a hidden burial context, or something close to one. And that raises a far darker possibility than a normal excavation ever would. What if the bones were not just buried there? What if they were meant to stay there? In archaeology, one of the most difficult tasks is distinguishing natural deposition from deliberate human action. Caves complicate that even more. Water can reshape sediment, rockfall can trap bodies, animals can disturb layers, time can compress and harden the floor in ways that make earlier events difficult to reconstruct. So the first responsibility of the team was not to invent a dramatic theory. It was to eliminate ordinary explanations. Could the remains have slipped into a void and been sealed by natural sediment over time? Could a collapse have trapped bones beneath a later layer? Could flood material have buried older remains and created the illusion of deliberate concealment? Could animal activity have created movement that only looked patterned from a distance? Those questions are essential. Archaeology survives by distrusting its own excitement, so the researchers studied the surrounding context in detail. They examined examined the stratigraphy of the floor. They recorded the depth of each fragment. They checked the sediment composition. They looked for signs of disturbance, cutting, voids, or filling that might suggest a pit. They compared the buried section to the untouched surrounding layers. They analyzed whether the floor above the bones was naturally formed or had been altered. And that is where the discovery became even stranger, because the buried remains seemed to sit beneath a section that did not look entirely natural, not artificial in some obvious modern sense, not carved stone or constructed blocks, but different, as if the floor had been disturbed, covered, and then compacted long ago. That possibility is deeply unsettling, because if the cave floor above the bones was intentionally altered or reformed, then someone wanted those remains hidden, and once concealment becomes part of the interpretation, every question changes. Now the issue is no longer just classification. Now the issue is motive. Who hid the bones? Why were they hidden under the floor rather than buried in open ground? Was the cave a sacred place, a forbidden place, a shelter, a tomb, or something else entirely? Were the remains treated with care or concealed out of fear? This is why discoveries under floors carry such psychological force. They imply secrecy. A body lying on a surface can be accidental. A body under a floor suggests purpose. As the excavation continued, more of the remains came into view, and the team faced another problem. The bones themselves did not immediately fit a simple interpretation. At first, the question was whether they were human. Then, as the shape of some fragments became clearer, the question shifted. If they were human, what kind of human? That may sound strange to non-specialists, but in paleoanthropology and archaeology, human is not always a simple category when you are dealing with ancient remains. Modern humans, archaic humans, Neanderthals, Denisovans, and other ancient populations can leave bones that are recognizably hominin, yet difficult to classify if preservation is incomplete or the anatomy is unusual. And some of these buried bones looked unusual. The fragments that appeared to belong to the skull region did not immediately align with expected modern human structure. The proportions of some long bones seemed difficult to reconcile with a normal body plan. Certain features suggested robustness, others did not. The deeper scientists looked, the more the remains resisted quick classification. That does not mean the bones were alien or supernatural. In real science, the most troubling discoveries are almost never dramatic in that way. They are troubling because they sit too close to the known pattern while refusing to fit inside it. And that is exactly what may have happened here. The remains seemed near enough to human anatomy to belong in the human story, yet strange enough to make the story less stable. This matters because classification is not just a label, it is the framework through which the entire find will be interpreted. If the bones belong to modern humans, the cave may represent an unusual burial context. If they belong to a known archaic population, the site may push back the range or behavior of that group. If they reflect a hybrid or unknown lineage, the implications become much larger. And that is where buried bones beneath a cave floor stop being a local mystery and start becoming a challenge to human history itself. Imagine what such a discovery would mean. A cave already carries associations of secrecy and preservation. A floor seals and protects what lies below it. Bones under that floor imply concealment across time. And bones that do not fit expected human patterns imply a category problem at the center of the find. That combination is almost designed to disturb both archaeologists and the public, because now you are no longer looking at old bones in a cave. You are looking at a hidden set of remains, sealed beneath a surface, possibly placed there on purpose, and possibly belonging to a body that does not align cleanly with the official map of ancient humanity. This is the point where ancient DNA becomes the next great hope. If preserved genetic material can be extracted, it may answer questions bone alone cannot. DNA can clarify relationships between populations. It can reveal whether the remains belong to modern humans, archaic humans, mixed ancestry, or a lineage not yet fully recognized. Ancient DNA has already transformed how science understands human evolution. It has shown that populations once thought fully separate actually interbred. It has revealed hidden branches of humanity from tiny fragments that anatomy alone could not classify with confidence. But DNA is fragile. Heat destroys it. Moisture degrades it. Bacteria contaminate it. Handling introduces modern material. Many ancient remains yield little or nothing usable. So while the idea of DNA promises clarity, the reality is more uncertain. And uncertainty is exactly what made the cave floor discovery so tense. Because before any lab result arrives, scientists are left with context and morphology. In other words, with story and shape. And both were already suggesting something deep deeply uncomfortable. The context implied hiding. The shape implied mismatch. Even without genetics, that combination is enough to make a discovery feel dangerous to the standard narrative. The public version of human history is still much cleaner than the actual evidence. Most people imagine a fairly simple sequence. Early ancestors, then later forms, then eventually modern humans. Maybe Neanderthals appear as a side branch. Maybe Denisovans are mentioned if the documentary is up to date. But the broader reality emerging from archaeology and ancient DNA is far messier. Human history seems to have involved overlapping populations, contact zones, admixture, disappearances, regional isolation, and lineages that may have left only partial traces. So when buried remains under a cave floor refuse to fit a known pattern, science has to take that seriously. Not because every anomaly becomes a new species, not because every hidden burial rewrites evolution, but because the human record is already incomplete enough that one more hidden population is entirely plausible. This is where the idea of ghost lineages becomes relevant. A ghost lineage is a population inferred from evidence, but not yet fully visible in the fossil record. Sometimes genetics suggests their existence, sometimes anatomy hints at them, sometimes archaeology reveals behavior or burial patterns that don't align comfortably with known groups. In the ancient world, entire populations may have lived, migrated, mixed, and disappeared, while leaving only fragments behind. Preservation is biased. Discovery is incomplete. Museum collections are full of cases that were interpreted with older models and older technology. That means the bones under the cave floor may represent not just an odd burial, but a gap in the map. A body or bodies from a population no one had clearly named. A hidden branch of humanity. A contact zone between lineages. Or a local group whose practices and anatomy sat outside what scientists expected to see in that place and time. And the cave floor itself keeps forcing the same question. Why hide them? Burials tell us about intention. Even the simplest burial can reflect choice. Positioning, covering, location, and treatment all matter. A body left under a floor is different from a body left in open ground. Floors separate spaces. They create above and below. They can mark sacred ground, conceal danger, establish memory, or remove a body from ordinary circulation. So the bones beneath the cave floor may not have been hidden casually. They may have been hidden because they mattered. That is what makes the discovery emotionally powerful. Human beings are disturbed by hidden bodies for a reason. A hidden object can be forgotten. A hidden body implies a decision. Someone knew those remains were there before history lost them. If the bones belong to a normal human burial, the cave may reveal a funerary tradition or ritual practice unlike the surrounding record. If the bones belong to a strange or unclassified skeleton, then the secrecy of the burial becomes even more unsettling. Were these remains hidden because they were revered, feared, protected, concealed from others, placed under the floor as part of a practice we no longer understand? Science may never recover all of that meaning, but archaeology can still recover structure, and structure is often enough to prove that the past was more deliberate than it first appears. One of the strongest possibilities in a case like this is that the cave floor covered the remains because the site was reused. A group may have buried the body and then continued occupying or revisiting the cave, sealing the remains beneath the surface over time. That would imply memory. It would imply that those who used the cave knew what lay beneath them. A floor can become a kind of threshold over the dead. That is an unsettling image. People living, moving, sitting, working, or sleeping above hidden bones. Not because they had forgotten them, because they had not. And if the bones belong to a body that does not fit any known human species, then the image becomes even stranger. It suggests the possibility that ancient people may have interacted directly with individuals or populations that later science would struggle to place at all. This is why the discovery feels so explosive even before a final conclusion. It forces too many difficult questions at once. What are the bones? Who put them there? Why were they hidden? What kind of body lay under the cave floor? And if the remains are not fully modern human, how many more such burials exist that no one has found yet? That last question may be the most important, because archaeology depends on survival and chance. A cave that preserves one body may erase another. A floor may protect remains in one spot while destroying context in another. An excavation may stop just meters away from a deeper chamber. A fragment can sit in storage for decades before someone reanalyzes it with better technology. The known human story is built on what survived and what was found, not on everything that once existed. That means discoveries like this do not just add details, they expose absence. They remind us how much may still be missing. So what did scientists really find under the cave floor? Perhaps a hidden burial, perhaps a forgotten ritual context, perhaps remains from a lineage no one had clearly identified, perhaps the evidence of an ancient act of concealment whose reason is gone forever. Whatever the final answer becomes, one thing is already certain. Bones hidden beneath a cave floor are never simple. They carry intention, they carry context, they carry the possibility that the most important discoveries are not lying in the open where anyone can see them. They are buried below the surface, sealed beneath what looks ordinary, waiting for one careful excavation to reveal that the ground beneath human history was hiding something far stranger than expected. And maybe that is why the team panicked, not because they found bones, because they found bones where bones were not supposed to be.